basically living life in the black is living life to its fullest.
Right.
Living life in a way that we are getting all of it out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting out of it what we're putting into it.
Right.
And if you don't want nothing out of life, don't put anything into it. That's
Right.
just like a business, right? If you don't want anything, your business is only going to give you what you put into it.
Right.
So that's kind of where this all came up with, and where it all came from. Hey guys, Jamie Nixon here with Be in the Black podcast, and I am joined today by Rebecca Bell-Houchin, and she is with Valerie Webb and Associates, and they are basically a real estate law firm, but you also do a lot of numerous other things that we're going to get into because I'm not even sure of all the things that they do, but they are a great company. Valerie, I've known Valerie for a really long time, and we're just going to shine some light on them and all that they do. I do know that one of the things that we're going to talk about is people's last will and testament, and you're thinking, wait a second, last week you and Donnie talked about music and how it was great in elementary and middle school and high school and all the crazy things you did, and that Being the Black podcast is about living life to its fullest. Well, one of the ways that you can live your life to the fullest is knowing that once that life is over, that has not become a burden to the people who love you and that you have left behind. Mm-hmm. And I know that's, we're about to get a little serious right here. So before we get serious, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Please share this on your social media channels. This is going to be a very informative podcast. You're going to learn a lot today. And one of the best ways to live life in its fullest is to make sure all the people that you love and care about are taken care of once you're gone. So Rebecca, nice to have you here. Thank you very much. And I know you're probably a little nervous right now. Is this your first podcast?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Okay.
It is. And thank you for having me, Jamie. I appreciate it.
No problem. And I know this is one of those subjects that, a lot of people don't necessarily like to talk about. Like some people don't want to even think about what happens after they're gone.
Right.
And so, but then there's other people who have already went and picked out their, their burial clothes, their casket, their tombstone, and they've already got their plot and everything. And those people are, they already have everything taken care of. One of the, I would say the biggest thing that I have right now personally is I have life insurance.
Right.
And I know that's a really big thing. I have children, so I want to make sure that when I'm gone that they're not having to worry about money for all those things. And I probably should go ahead and pick some of that stuff out and have some things done. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I had a will and I cannot find it, and I don't even know if once a will is initiated, is it forever?
Yeah, until you revoke it.
Okay.
Right.
And to revoke it, and I know we're getting ahead of, this is questions off the cuff, which you told me not to do.
Right.
If you made a new will, does it automatically revoke the old one?
Yeah, so the new will say any will that you've done prior is now revoked. So,
okay.
But you want to make sure that you destroy the previous will, because if you don't, then maybe that will is found and then your new will is not found. So you want to make sure you destroy it.
That's a great tip. So anyways, let's get right into it. And why is a last will and testament important?
Yeah, so I always say, if you don't have a will, the state has a plan for you. If you don't have a plan, which is the will, then the state's going to have a plan for you. And so what that means is the state has rules about how your assets will be divided if you don't have a will. So if you don't have a will, the state will say, okay, this is how your probate estate will be divided. And what I mean by probate estate is something different than your entire estate. Your entire estate includes all of your assets and insurance and things like that, your house, your cars, everything. The probate estate only includes things like things that are not going to be automatically sent to somebody, like your insurance has beneficiary designations, and your house may be jointly owned, and things that are jointly owned or pay on death will have an automatic transfer to the other person. The probate estate are things that are not going to be automatically transferred. So things like maybe your car, maybe you have a checking account that does not have a pay on death. Those things are going to be handled through the probate process. And so if you don't have a plan, the state is going to designate how that's going to be divided. So basically what I get is if somebody dies without a will, that's called intestate succession. If you're married and you don't have children, then the spouse is going to get everything. If you're unmarried and you have children, and that includes biological children and adopted children, but not stepchildren that have not been adopted, then that's going to be divided equally among the children. If you're married and you have children, and this is always a challenge for people when they hear this, because what happens is if you die and you're married and you have children, people automatically assume that it's just going to go to the spouse first and the children maybe later. It gets divided among the spouse and the child, and the way it goes is if you have a spouse and maybe one child, it's going to be half the spouse and half to the child, and that's your probate estate, meaning the things that don't get passed automatically. So half to the spouse, half to the child. And then if you have 2 children and 1 spouse, then it's 1/3 and 1/3 and 1/3. The spouse never gets less than 1/3. So if you have 3 children and 1 spouse, then the spouse is going to get 1/3, and the children will divide among the other 2/3. But yeah, so that's always a surprise to people. And what really confuses people is when the stepchildren come in for maybe you have a spouse that dies and they have children from a prior marriage. They come in and then they're wanting their 2/3 share, and that really can be something that's a challenge for the new spouse when especially when you're not transferring. They haven't transferred things through pay on death or beneficiary designation like that. Maybe they don't have. Maybe the new spouse is not on the deed, and now suddenly stepchildren come in, and the house has to be sold to satisfy that probate estate.
So let me go ahead and say this. All of that information, because you guys are going to have to rewind or just take your mouse and go back and hear her say all this again.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. But the thing about it is me just hearing that. I'm knowing now that I cannot live my life in the fullest or live life in the black, knowing that all of this stuff could happen. Mm-hmm. Because that's a lot of turmoil. That's a lot of stress.
Yeah. And
I could see that it would cause a lot of maybe dysfunction, or just, it could divide families.
Definitely. And like I said, most of my clients just automatically assume that it's going to go to the spouse first and then the children. And especially when you have blended families where there are stepchildren involved, sometimes you can handle the distribution through life insurance rather than, getting part of the estate. There are lots of ways to making sure that people will get their fair inheritance without necessarily causing problems with the new family.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, so before we go any further and continue this serious topic, I do want to go ahead and thank our sponsors, Deja Mu Coffee House and Creamery. Actually, it's Deja Mu Creamery and Coffee Company. I want to make sure I get that right. They are generous enough to sponsor our podcast, along with Key Heating and Cooling. So, hey, it's warming up. It's going to be a very hot weekend. I'm sure that this podcast will come out after this weekend. But this Saturday that we have coming up, it's going to reach 100 degrees, and the last thing you want is for your HVAC unit to break down. But if it does, you can always call Key Heating and Cooling. Those guys will definitely come out and help you out. So, what can be stated in a will?
Yeah. So what's really important about what you want to put in the will are making sure that your wishes are outlined, because if you don't outline your wishes in your will, nobody's going to know what you want. And it's just going to default to whatever your family thinks you need to have, or whatever the state needs is just going to basically default to the guidelines of the state. So make sure that you're really outlining what you want to have done in your will. A couple of things that are really, really key in outlining in a will is making sure that if you have minor children, that you're outlining a testamentary trust. And what a testamentary trust is in a will is making sure that your minor children are cared for. And what that does is it says, hey, if I have minor children at the time that maybe the second of us die, me and my wife die, or me and my husband die, and I have minor children, that they don't get all of the money at once, a trust is set up on their behalf, and maybe you want to say something like, oh, they get 10% when they're 18, 25% when they're 21, and they get the rest when they're 25, but the trust can be managed by my brother who's a trustee. You can name trustees, you can name how you want the trust to be managed, and how, and then you can put in outlines about what's really important to you in terms of how you want that trust to be managed, and what's really important to you in terms of things like, oh, I want to make sure my child graduates from college, they can get extra bonus if they do, or if they want to be involved in sports, or, you know, so you can really outline how you want that trust to be managed and key points of things that are really important to you in terms of guidelines for the trustees. In addition, what's also really important to put in wills, and a lot of folks don't do this in wills, especially when you're going online to do a will, or you're doing a form will, is making sure that if you have someone who's going to be a beneficiary who's special needs or on government benefits, that if they do inherit, that they get a trust set up in their benefit, because if they don't, what can happen is that that special needs person or someone who's on government benefits inherits, and when they do so without a trust, a special needs trust, they can lose their benefits, and they'll get that money, and then they end up having to reimburse the government with that inheritance, and they get kicked off of their benefits, and then they have to reapply. So what you were trying to achieve with giving that person an inheritance is absolutely not met. Another thing is that if you want to disinherit somebody in a will, make sure that you do disinherit that person, and make it very clear that that person's disinherited. A lot of times what people will do is they'll say, okay, I want to leave that person $1, or they'll just not list that person at all in the will. And when they do that, it opens the door to say, hey, my dad didn't list me in the will because he just forgot. And then that person can come in and say, I want a child's share of what I would have gotten. So make sure that if you do want to disinherit someone, you make it really clear that you're disinheriting that person in the will. So those things are really important to make sure you put into the will.
That has to be one of, I mean, I guess if you're disinheriting someone, that is something that, you know, you wouldn't think that, oh, I can just leave them out of my will. Because you always hear that, I'm just going to leave you out of the will.
Right.
Well, that doesn't necessarily accomplish what you're wanting to accomplish.
Right.
And once again, guys, we're talking about something, and if you scrolled forward, or you're just wanting to know what this is about, why is this about living life to its fullest? Why about being in black? It's because you need things like this in place, because everything that you just said, like, I would generally hate the fact knowing that my family's having to go through all of that once I'm gone, that my death, on top of dying and what that brings, but then it brings all this turmoil, and it brings things that that's just not pleasant. So once we've talked about a will, what about also establishing like a power of attorney? Now, I did know this, and I knew this because of I was in the hospital for 2 weeks with COVID.
Oh gosh.
There is a difference between power of attorney and something about the power of attorney and with healthcare. Right. They're different, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's the durable power of attorney that manages your personal affairs and financial, and then there's the healthcare power of attorney that manages your healthcare decisions. And both are important for me. When I talk to clients, they're very interested in making sure that things are dealt with when they die. But for me, personally, it's really important that while they're alive or while they're incapacitated, whether that's a short time or disability or incapacitation or long-term incapacitation, that their decisions are being made based on what they would want. And so having a durable power of attorney for financial and personal decisions, and then having the healthcare power of attorney, are really, really important, and making sure those are in place, because you really want to make sure that the person that you want to be making those decisions on your behalf are assigned to that, and then also outlined in your durable power of attorney. Additionally, if you don't have those documents in place, you can have any number of people coming in and taking care of those things for you, and you may not have, they may not be the people that you want to be making those decisions for you, and they may not be doing the things that you want them to do in the way you want them to do it. Also, you can have somebody come in and go to the court and ask for a guardian or conservatorship over your person and your estate if you don't have those documents in place. And that can be a very upsetting process. It can be a very expensive process. And again, you can have somebody come in and take care of those things that you wouldn't necessarily want to have taking care of those things. And if there's nobody to take care of those things for you, the court will assign someone, and it can be an attorney, it can be somebody else that comes in and takes care of those things. And they're not necessarily going to have your best interest at heart, even though legally they're supposed to.